Amit, today we're going to talk about key opportunities in Brazil.
Yeah.
So this interview is really directed at international investors who are considering, starting or increasing their exposure to Brazilian assets.
Sure.
So the first I want to ask, why Brazil?
Well, I think Brazil is a wonderful country. It's one of the large emerging countries of the world with a young population. Also, it's hitting what people say it's a demographic sweet spot in terms of the workforce ratio and the population. Yeah. And, it's a country with a lot of natural resources. And despite the current recession, I think most analysts are quite bullish about the long-term potential of the country. I'm talking 10, 20 years.
So in terms of the investment opportunities, what really stands out in Brazil at the moment?
Well, that's a very tricky question. Let me answer that in different categories. First of all, if you look at equities, everyone's fishing in large caps. So the Bovespa index has actually underperformed since 2008, and it's subject to a lot of speculative flows. So I'd say if you've got someone really good advising you, it's probably better to look at smaller and medium-sized companies in that Bovespa range, those in particular which are focusing on domestic demand and consumer staples, right? And also companies which are exporting, because some of those companies have done very well with a weaker real. So that's what I'd say in terms of equities. Make sure you've got a very good fund manager with a good track record. And also something much more specialized is private equity. And that's again looking at the microeconomy of Brazil. So relatively detached from the macroeconomic volatility. So when I say private equity, there are certain sectors like healthcare, IT, and retail which continue to do well based on consumer demand and demographic trends. And also in terms of holding money for the short to medium term, some fixed income funds and also treasury notes are returning a very high rate because the base rate is 14.25, so you can get between 10 and 13% on some of these funds if you're parking your money in between transactions.
So what are the risks involved in investing in private equity? Because aren't you just investing directly in companies?
Well, you can either invest directly in companies or through a fund which has maybe 5 to 10 positions. And in terms of risk, yes, there is risk, but I think if you're touching private equity, not just in Brazil, but anywhere in the world, you've got to be looking at 3 to 5 years. And I say in Brazil, you're looking more at 5 years. And you're sacrificing liquidity for return. But you've got to have a certain amount of capital to be able to do that in the first place.
Brazil, isn't it a little bit risky to invest in? I mean, what with political turmoil, negative growth, and currency depreciation?
Yeah, well, you've really focused on some key areas there, and yes, we need to be aware of it. And some of that actually has created the current opportunity in terms of bringing investment into Brazil. Negative growth, as you say, last year in 2015, the economy contracted by 3.8%, and it's expected to decline by 3 to 3.2% this year. And some people are saying there'll be a moderate upturn in 2017. So yeah, very good point. But at the same time, people are still looking at the market here for certain sectors. Inflation's high, yes. The exchange rate has fallen significantly since 2011. It hit 4.2 against the dollar last year. Although trying to predict where the exchange rate's going, that's a dangerous game.
Okay.
Regarding the political scandal, a lot of people believe it will be better in the long term, but how long will it take? Because I think the process is going to take a lot of time, and there could be, in a few months before the Olympics, there could be a different president sitting in office.
Okay, in your experience, what are the biggest fears your clients have investing in Brazil?
Well, there are several fears. I've spoken to institutional investors like family offices in the US and UK, and I've spoken to high net worth individuals, and also, sole traders who want to go and set up a business in Brazil. And their fears, the biggest fear is exchange rate. We've seen the exchange rate, let's say from 4 years ago, it was about 2 to the dollar, 2 reals to the dollar. Now it's 3.5 was 4 earlier this year. So those kind of fluctuations are, they make people procrastinate quite a lot. Like, when's the right time to get in? What's my net return going to be? Even if I get local growth in Brazil, what will I really do if I convert it back to sterling or dollars? So exchange rate is the biggest single fear. And a lot of people say, well, how long is this political thing going to drag on for? People flag that because it's very, very opaque. And there are so many members of parliament implicated in the political scandal, which also involves Petrobras, the biggest oil company.
Okay.
And I mean, those are the two biggest areas of concern.
Okay. And is there anything you can do to mitigate those?
Well, with currency, I get people asking me all of the time, when's the right time to bring pounds or dollars into Brazil? And it's a very dangerous game to predict the right timing, because when you make that decision, the next day it could deteriorate more, it could move in your favor, you never know. So what I say is, in terms of making sensible decisions, I say work out the time frame for making your particular transaction or acquisition, and then phase it in. Phase in tranches of 2, 3, 4, depending on how big the transfer is, and to an extent live with the consequences, because if you're investing in Brazil, that does suggest you're operating on a higher risk profile anyway.
I understand.
Yeah.
So where do you think the real is going to go?
Well, over what, this year or the next?
Next 5 years.
Next 5 years? Okay, well, there's so many factors influencing it. I'm putting myself out there a little bit. I think in 5 years it would have strengthened significantly, maybe not back to record levels, but I think it will strengthen. Having said that, a lot of people, we're in April 2016 now, a lot of people said the real dollar would be around 4.5. It's actually strengthening over the last couple of weeks to 3.6. So again, as I said, there's so many factors, like the perception of where we are in terms of regime change, and the oil price, Chinese demand, which obviously affects things like demand for mining products and oil. So there's so many geopolitical factors at play. But I'd say that it will strengthen. Let me be a little bit vague and say significantly over the next 5 years, but not to record levels.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is Brazil a good place to retire?
I think it would be a wonderful place to retire. I live in Rio. I live in Rio de Janeiro, and there are many foreigners who come to Rio to retire because of the quality of life, the weather, and the beaches, and Brazil, especially the coastal regions of Brazil, attract a lot of retirees. I think it's a very good place now because the currency is in the favor of inward investors, and retirees just need to show, but they need to show $2,000 a month, need to be 60 plus, and satisfy a few simple criteria to qualify. But I think, it's a wonderful place to retire. And at the moment, if you're thinking of buying property or anything like that, it's probably easier than it was for someone holding dollars or pounds compared to 3 or 4 years ago. So, if that's on the agenda, it's a good time to review seriously.
I should tell my mum.
Yeah, great.
She could go there. Can you tell me more about the investor visa in Brazil?
Sure. I mean, that's available for anyone investing, either opening a company or investing into a company. And the minimum has just been raised to 500,000 reals, which is approximately $150,000. So it's relatively accessible if you compare it to other major economies in the world. And what you have to do is keep that money invested for 3 years and employ a certain number of locals, and then you can review whether the extension can be granted. And it's a good way to get in if you're a little bit entrepreneurial. And I know many people who've set up ecotourism businesses, consultancies, salons, boutique hotels. So if you're entrepreneurial and you like the Brazilian lifestyle, I think it's a great way to participate in the growth of the economy.
Oh, fantastic. So do you think the Brazilian Olympics will have any impact on the economy at all?
I think it'll have an impact on the local economy in Rio. Maybe not the whole city, but certain areas of development. But it's just like the London Olympics, really. It had an impact on a certain part of East London. It'll be a great feel-good factor, hopefully, at a time where, when the country needs it, especially at the moment in this current crisis. But I don't think it'll have a massive or a significant impact on the macroeconomy, because it's it's a 2-week mega event, and then you've got the Paralympics afterwards. So in total, it's about 4 weeks worth of mega event, and I don't think it'll have much of an impact, but I'm very much looking forward to it personally.
Are you going to go to any of the events?
Going to a few events, yeah. I can't wait. I hope Team GB. I'm supporting Team GB and Brazil.
Okay.
Jointly.
That'd be a bit tricky if they're on the same event.
I'll just cheer for both of them.
Fantastic. And just to wrap up, I mean, how can people find out more information and maybe get in contact with you?
Our main company, we're ipanemawealth.com. They can get in touch via the contact page. And we have a new page called ipanemaglobe.com, which will highlight some of the opportunities available and how to get invested in Brazil specifically.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.